Let's take a look at this now. Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi is lobbying for the review and temporary withdrawal from 2 international agreements on refugee protection. Motsoaledi has published a white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection for comments. It proposes that the country withdraws from the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and the 1967 UN Protocol on Refugees. We speak now to Ottilia Maunganidze, Head of Special Projects at the Institute for Security Studies, on this white paper. Thank you very much, Ottilia, for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start on page 34 of the white paper, where the Department of Home Affairs speaks of controversial provisions of the Refugees Act and regulation. It reads, on the 1st of January 2020, 3 Amendments Act altered the policy framework of the Department of Home Affairs in material respects. These are the Refugees Amendment Act 33 of 2008, Refugees Amendment Act 12 of 2011, Refugees Amendment Act 11 of 2017. And now it says that the policy recommendation is for the government of the Republic of South Africa to review and or withdraw from the 1951 Convention and the 1967 Protocol with a view to accede to them with reservations like other countries. The procedure involves depositing the reservations with Secretary General of the United Nations. When we take a look that this is one has been released for public comment, but further than that, if we take a look at the future, will this pass constitutional muster?
Right. Thanks a lot for starting there, perhaps, because, of course, what the Department of Home Affairs is suggesting is a near complete overhaul of South Africa's immigration, but also asylum and refugee protection system. On the refugee aspect, it's really 2 main elements that would be impacted beyond whether or not South Africa withdraws and then re-ratifies with reservations. It's really on the asylum seeker process for South Africa, how it goes about that, and whether or not it receives people who would have passed through another country that is a signatory to the Refugee Convention. And then the second element relates to which rights, mainly socioeconomic rights, would apply to asylum seekers and refugees. It is the second part that may prove a lot more complicated for the South African government to amend, because it may require amending certain provisions within the Bill of Rights itself. And those, of course, do require a larger majority in Parliament to pass, because a lot of those rights, whether they relate to housing, healthcare, or social security, apply more generally to everyone, regardless of their immigration status. So that's going to be the largest hurdle. It's not that it can't be passed, but it is to say they would need to show to what extent in amending these parts of the existing refugee laws, they are not infringing on rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights.
Right. Let's then look at citizenship on page 53. It reads policy framework proposals. It says the harsh reality is that there are simply insufficient resources available to cater for all the various persons who might enter South African borders requiring citizenship in order to access benefits, rights and privileges that go with it. The United States, Canada, Switzerland and Britain are developed countries with resources that far exceed those of South Africa. They have developed strict immigration, citizenship and refugee laws in order to protect the rights of their citizenship. Now, it also reads that the Citizenship Act and Births and Registration Act must be repealed in their entirety and be included in the single legislation dealing with citizenship, immigration and refugee protection. It says this will remove contradictions in the paths towards citizenship, as is the case with 3 pieces of legislation. What possible complications could this present, if at all?
Well, this is the one that has the least complications, to be honest. It was perhaps one of the more surprising inclusions in the white paper process, because, of course, at the moment, in order for a foreign national to gain South African citizenship, they do have to abide by the Citizenship Act. And the requirements there are quite stringent, so much so that the number of people annually that become citizens of South Africa who would not otherwise have been because they had a birthright to South African citizenship. So those that go through a naturalization process is actually among the lowest globally. So it's less that there's a problem with the Citizenship Act, but perhaps the real challenge relates to some of the ways that people have been able to acquire citizenship. What is interesting here, Dudu, is that in the note that accompanies the white paper, the Minister of Home Affairs acknowledges that some of the gaps have actually been related to corruption and related to inefficiencies within the department. Now, amending the Citizenship Act will not address those structural inefficiencies within the department. However, the one element that is proposed to be changed relates to whether children born in South Africa can have some direct citizenship, which is currently provided for in the citizenship laws of the country. Otherwise, the rest of the provisions really continue to align with how people can be able to get citizenship in South Africa. The main difference, though, is that the decision won't rest with the minister, but really through the processes of either an immigration board or essentially bureaucrats who are mandated with the administration of what would then be a law on citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection in one bundle.
Sure. Let's get into immigration, because on page 65 it goes on to speak of illegal foreigners. It reads, South Africa is today a great place to live and many people in the world aspire to live, work, or to be citizens of South Africa. In the result, many foreign nationals come to the country and stay illegally. No one can account for all undocumented migrants. Over the years, Africa Check has come across many claims of 5 million migrants, 6 million, and even 13 million migrants. The Department of Home Affairs has no idea as to how many illegal immigrants are in South Africa. However, Immigration Services deports between 15,000 and 20,000 illegal foreigners every year, and the number is on the increase, it says. And so on these regulatory bodies and the bureaucrats that you speak of, what do you perceive? I don't know, because there's a lot of countries that are also cited in terms of the reservations that have been made, some from the continent, some from outside of the continent. But what is it that they have managed to get right, do you perceive?
Right, so we do have to make a distinction between the immigration component of this proposed law and the refugee protection one, because often people that are seeking asylum, that have fled conflict or other forms of persecution are clumped together with those that migrate to South Africa, whether for economic opportunities or otherwise. So first, I think that distinction is important. Then we turn to the proposals around immigration. It's perhaps one of the first times that the department has admitted that they have no idea how many people are irregular or have entered the country lawfully and then extended their stay. Now, for that admission to come from Home Affairs, it presents a huge problem, because this is the department whose job it is to know those numbers. Now, what can only be extrapolated from the data that is provided by Stats SA is that a lot of the estimations are inflated. If, for example, we look at 20,000 deportations on an annual basis, then that doesn't quite tally with, for example, suggesting that over 10 million people are irregular or undocumented. However, what it speaks to, which in my mind is not necessarily solved by amending a law, but by dealing with the processes that have led to the increase in the number of people that are not documented. There's only one government department in South Africa whose job it is to document people on the basis of their citizenship, their nationality, and whether or not they have come into the country as migrants or asylum seekers. And that is the Department of Home Affairs. So perhaps the suggestion that it is the law that needs to be amended may be faulty on the immigration aspect, because what has been raised by a number of organizations is less that the law is problematic. It is that the actual implementation of that law, ensuring that there is no backlog when people apply for visas, ensuring that processes are quicker, especially as it relates to asylum seekers. Those are where the issues are. And the law is only one component of it. The practice is what has led to a lot of complaints around the way in which the department is operating. So hopefully, beyond just amending the law, there are efforts to ensure that the department also addresses current working shortfalls that exist, which would hopefully then limit the number of people either that enter the country illegally or enter legally and then do not renew their permits or stay on visitors' visas while working, because it is there where the challenge lies, in the administration of the Act, less in the Act itself.
I do want to say this, though, that I'm not sure if we can even connect the two, but just overall, when you take a look at what is happening around the world, just yesterday the United Kingdom letting go of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, because of the immigration issue. And so South Africa is not the only country that is grappling or trying to amend its immigration laws. How should we understand that, just from a worldwide perspective, right? Because also you hear a lot that you've got immigrants who are making perilous journeys while they are there. Is intra-Africa migration much bigger than what we are made to believe, that people who leave the continent are much larger?
Right, so maybe to do away with the one element which relates to Suella Braverman's dismissal as minister. That had less to do with her position or stance on migration, but more specifically on statements made around people that were part of pro-Palestine protests, which is a separate issue. But putting South Africa's issues into context, yes, the majority of Africans migrate within the African continent. Further, the majority of Africans move to neighboring countries. So while, for example, in South Africa, we do have people from across the continent as far afield as Tunisia in the north, for example, the majority of people that are going to come to South Africa will be from neighboring countries, from Mozambique, Eswatini, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Botswana, being some of the larger numbers where you find people coming into South Africa. That's not to say that people don't go elsewhere. In fact, countries like Cote d'Ivoire, for example, have over 30% of their population are people that are not originally from the country and people that have migrated over generations. So for Africa, migration is an issue. Just 2 weeks ago, the Pan-African Forum on Migration was convened by the African Union together with the International Organization for Migration, and the key discussion point there was actually around continental free movement and free trade as a means to stimulate development. On the other side of the world, whether it's in Europe or the Americas, they are having similar discussions on migration. The focus is almost always on those people that enter countries illegally. But what the data shows coming from the International Organization for Migration is actually that the majority of people prefer to follow legal channels, whether it's to South Africa or to Germany or to anywhere else in the world. People prefer to apply for visas, get their visas, and have legal access. Part of that is because they might want to, of course, work in legal sectors, which you cannot be able to do so if you do not have your documents in order. But the focus, not only in South Africa, mind, but also in other countries across the world, has been overwhelmingly on what are known as irregular migrants, perhaps to the detriment of those that do want to travel legally, because it has meant greater restrictions that then also apply to those that are applying for their visas and want to work lawfully.
Ottilia, thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon. Ottilia Maunganidze is the head of special projects at the Institute for Security Studies.